The Shadow Home Secretary of the United Kingdom spent Monday on a fishing boat in the English Channel, accusing the French Navy of trying to intimidate him with 17 live rounds. By Tuesday morning, he was on a beach in France, narrating groups of migrants over his shoulder like a wildlife documentary. And somewhere in the middle of all this, a presenter read him the actual crossing figures live on air, down 45%. And Chris Philp's rebuttal was to physically turn the camera around and hand the argument to the bloke driving the boat. Now I want to walk you through both days because this is a man who wants to run the Home Office, and his big week of maritime theatre fell apart in ways I don't even think he's even noticed yet. So, quick scene setting: Chris Philp, MP for Croydon South, Shadow Home Secretary, and a man whose constituents presumably have opinions about their mortgages, their bills, and whether their MP is currently in the country. He's spent the last 2 days going on what can only be described as Border Patrol cosplay in French waters, filming content for the crew in tow. Monday was the boat. Here's how he described it.
Well, we were doing an interview on the back of the fishing boat, and the French warship approached. It came very close. It was just a couple of 100 metres away from us. And as it passed the closest point of contact, they started firing. They fired 17 live rounds. We could see the spray being pushed up in the waters. They were definitely live rounds. They weren't firing beforehand. They weren't firing afterwards. No warnings were given at any point. There was no live firing warning in place. There were no warnings given over the radio. There were no signs displayed. So the way it made me feel is that this was an attempt at intimidation.
17 live rounds, warning shots, attempted intimidation. The Shadow Home Secretary personally targeted by the French Republic. It's a hell of a story. And to be fair to him, something did happen. A French patrol vessel passed a few hundred metres away and an officer of the stern fired a pistol into the water. And now you can see that's on film. So here's what the French said about it.
There's been a statement from the French prefecture for the sea, for that area. They say the French Navy units do conduct regular training exercises. Individual combat training is part of the normal activities on a vessel, and that the regulatory signals required under international standards for this firing exercise were displayed, and that the safety area was respected, and that the exercise was unrelated to the presence of a British vessel in the area.
A training exercise. Now, you can either believe the French account or you can believe Philp's, but notice what he's actually asking you to accept, that the French Navy saw a Conservative front bencher on a whelk boat and decided the appropriate diplomatic response was small arms fire. The Times had a reporter on board, by the way, and he described a naval officer firing a handgun into the water, aimed away from the boat. Some intimidation campaign. They shot some fish. And I take Philp's account of what you can see from the boat more seriously if the same interview didn't contain this moment, which was probably my favourite out of all of it. The presenter puts the actual Home Office numbers to him.
Of course, in the last few weeks we've had lovely weather, haven't we? The actual numbers, it's important for our viewers to know, Chris Philp, are down, aren't they? 13,000 arrived on small boats from January to the 24th of July, which is a 45% decrease compared to the same period last year and 18% lower than the same period in 2024. So you say that Shabana Mahmood's policies aren't working, but the numbers are coming down.
You've just heard a skipper who's out on this water every single day, Matt here, tell you.
But I'm just talking about the actual numbers, the physical numbers. They are coming down. You must accept that.
But they are not lower because the weather has been worse. You just heard a skipper say that. The numbers are down, not because of Shabana Mahmood, but because the weather's worse.
13,000 crossings to late July, down 45% on last year, down 18% on the same period in 2024. Those are Home Office figures published weekly, and the Shadow Home Secretary's counter-evidence offered live on national TV is that Matt the skipper reckons it's been a bit windy. I've checked because, unlike Chris, I like to verify the claims, and the recent stretch has had a lovely calm conditions, and the numbers still haven't spiked. GB News, of all people, grudgingly admitted this month that the drop looks real, and when GB News is fact-checking you, well, something's gone badly wrong with your morning. But here's where it gets really good, because the weather defence detonates his own argument from the day before. Tuesday, back on the beach, Philp was asked about hotels, and honestly, the way the presenter phrased this, absolutely chef's kiss.
Have any of the people thanked you for your part in the previous Conservative government for opening so many hotels in which they can now be housed?
Well, the last Conservative government, I think, shut about 200 hotels and reduced the crossing numbers by a third in their last full year in office.
So, following the logic here, because he set a trap and then walked right into it himself. When crossings fell by a third in 2023 under the Conservatives, that was policy. Skill, governance, £700 million to a foreign country for absolutely nothing return, whatever you want to call it. But when crossings fell by 45% in 2026 under Labour, that's just the weather. Even though we've had the hottest weather since 1976.
Shabana Mahmood's deal is making no difference. I've got video footage of the French doing nothing at all. The only thing protecting our borders right now is the weather. And in my view, that is just not acceptable.
OK, well, the latest figures do show a fall. But Chris Philp, interesting
weather.
to get your...
And his own record makes this even worse. Philp was the actual immigration minister. Minister for Immigration Compliance, it said on the door, from 2020 to 2021. Crossings when he took the job ran about 8,500 a year. By the end of 2021, they'd more than tripled to 28,500, all on his watch. And in February of 2021, this same man stood up and praised the French authorities for preventing, in his words, more than 70% of attempted crossings. The French were heroic partners when they were covering for his numbers. Now they're the enemy navy taking pot shots at his dinghy. Nothing about France has changed, his job title has, really. So I'll keep watching this car crash so that you don't have to. So subscribe if you haven't already, and memberships are open if you can support the channel that way too. Because we haven't got to the end of the deterrent yet. On the beach, Philp explained that the real answer is leaving the ACHR and deporting people within a week, and mourned the Rwanda plan that Labour cancelled just before it was due to start.
The British government are providing hotels and there is almost no chance of deportation. These crossings will continue, and that is why the Conservatives have a new approach and a new policy, which is to leave the ECHR and make sure illegal immigrants are deported. That acts as a deterrent, and that will not only stop illegal immigration, it will save lives as well.
Yeah. I suppose it should be noted that the number of asylum hotels is coming down in all of this, and it peaked. I think it was 2023 was the peak of the number of asylum seekers in hotels. It went up quite sharply after the end of the pandemic.
Let me tell you that Rwanda plan achieved in the last 2 years that it existed. Per the Home Office accounts, £700 million, 4 volunteers, 0 enforced deportations. 84,000 people crossed the channel between the day the deal was signed and the day it was scrapped. That was his deterrent, and Philp sat in that government throughout, defending it on every sofa in every broadcast media. And he still is, to be fair. The man lecturing France about wasting effort spent more per deportee than it would have cost to send them by private yacht with a butler. So what was this week actually for? He said it himself on the beach. He can't change government policy, and he knows that. The crossing he filmed weren't stopped by him being there. The migrants he lectured got on the boats anyway, and one of the people smugglers was reportedly standing in the group while he did his piece to camera. That was his content. A Shadow Home Secretary with no policy achievements to point at, whose own tenure saw triple crossings, generating footage of himself looking busy near a problem he made worse. Meanwhile, the government he's shouting at signed a £662 million deal with France, and the numbers went down. And his response to that is stand on a beach in France, insisting his eyes are better than the data. He really is an idiot abroad. The French Navy didn't need to fire warning shots at Philp. His own record does that job for him every time he opens his mouth. Like in the example you can see when he's talking about the Tory purge, which is in the video that's on screen now. Thanks for watching, don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.